Hello, I'm Steve. A little about myself. I'm a retired law enforcement officer with 20 years of service. I began my career in the jail, worked the road, and became an investigator. During my career, my training consisted of everything from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician. I've investigated crimes from thefts to homicides. After retiring and becoming aware of true crime and web sleuths, I started my channel for web sleuths to better understand the perspectives of law enforcement. Not only do we cover true crime, I go out into the field and assist families who have lost loved ones to homicide and their cases are considered cold. Join me as we look and bring attention to these critical cases. Hello, everyone. Glad you're here. We want to welcome everybody for being here. If you're new to the channel, thank you for coming. As always, while you're in chat, be respectful of families, mods, and each other. We'll have a short presentation, after which we'll answer any questions that Mrs. Steve here marks as everybody in chat participates. And we look forward to those questions and look forward to answering those. Is there any updates or anything we need to do before we go?
Nope.
All righty, we'll get started then.
I don't think so.
Yeah, we have a lot of different devices.
Nope, we're good.
All right, excellent. All right, tonight we're going to be talking about some of the information that's as the court hearings move forward. Of course, you're going to have motions and objections and findings and directions by the court. We're going to be discussing some of the objections to the state motion for a protective order that the defense has brought forth. But if you have any information about this case of the homicides of Madison, Kaylee, Ethan, and Zana, absolutely make sure that law enforcement has that information for the fact that we need justice for them. And of course, Kohberger is facing charges that from these homicides and the burglary of the residents. So with that being said, we'll get right into it. And of course, this is Kohberger, and this is what he is court appearance appears to be whenever he goes in, which is drastically different than you'll see with a lot of different courts, and especially with what you saw with Richard Allen with the Delphi. Two different personalities, opposite poles, and of course, this is how he wishes to be perceived, and absolutely has a right to it. Understand it. He'll make absolute best use of it, and I cannot argue one point about that he shouldn't have this opportunity to address the court in a respectful manner. If he is the one that is found guilty of these crimes, then of course, at that moment from after he is found guilty, of course, he won't be attending, if he's found guilty, the court dressed in such a manner, then he would be assigned certain dress. But until that point, and if that point ever gets here, this is what we should expect to see. A very confident individual that will be fighting every step of the way. And as we see with this objection to the state motion for protective order, it's started. And I've got quite a few comments and also some emails that, it's always, so far, it's been pretty much the probable cause affidavits and the search warrants, the arrest warrants, all this other stuff that we've seen from Pennsylvania all the way to Idaho and Washington State, information that's come out about him. And it's been one-sided. Now we're starting to see the court stuff coming out, and especially with this objection. And there's been some good points brought up from this objection. And there's nothing in my eyes, I really don't see anything. I was surprised by a couple of the findings that we'll be talking about. And one of them is very concerning. But that doesn't mean that regardless of what the prosecution claims and what the defense claims out of court and through these motions, doesn't mean that's what will be presented in court at certain things. They'll make these statements, and the other side will make statements within the court, answer those questions, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. And just for the fact that someone proclaims something at this moment in time does not mean that it is always going to be viewed, or that is all the evidence that they have at, for the future uh, moments in court. Because new evidence can always be found, new evidence can be brought forth, and hopefully that will be the case. But anyway, Ann Taylor, who is a public defender that is representing Kohberger, of course, has filed a objection to the state's motion for a protective order. And when you read it, it makes, this is their view, and there's plenty of documents out there. I looked up, and there was probably in the last 2 or 3 days from the 22nd, 21st, 22nd, and that there's multiple documents out there. And I started to go and just pick different case points from all the documents. And then I said, no, I don't want to confuse for the fact that you'll have to go in there and find each document to find out where the basis for that statement was made. And so I'm just going to focus today on the state motion for the protective order. I mean, if you go and look at those documents in Idaho through the court systems, you'll see everything there from where the judge ruled on that cameras will be in the courtroom as of now, due to that the public has a right to see, but at any point, the judge has the authority to do what he wishes with those cameras. So for right now, we're going to get to see all this. And like I said, I started to pull those and have them in here too, but I just didn't want to confuse the issue with different quotes from different motions and filings within the court. So we're just going to be focusing on this one tonight. All right. One of the things, and this is, it's somewhat in order, but it's not, not all the quotes are in order. If you want to go see it, just go into Google and look up Kohberger objection to the state motion for a protective order, and an 8-page document will pop up. That's the easiest way to find it, because when I went through the Idaho search engine for certain documents, I've got the list of all the documents since day one, but this specific one wasn't in there. Drove me crazy for a while until I finally figured out how to find it. But anyway, they the attorneys for Kohberger and have come to the court and have filed this objection. And they're making claims that there's some material the state wishes to hide that should be within discovery, and that should be provided to Kohberger. And the courts will clarify that and see if there's any. When they read and they make the findings on this, we'll find out exactly if the state is holding back stuff that is discoverable, or if they're not. But there's some pretty interesting claims made in this objection. And but you can see here, one of the things is that they upon responding to the 911 call, of course, they found Madison, Kaylee, Zana, and Ethan deceased. And it was interesting how the defense put in this objection that they found a K-bar knife sheath placed next, and they used the word placed, which I find that extremely interesting. Not that it was discovered or it was, for whatever multiple words you could have used here, they chose the words placed. And that is extremely interesting to me. I don't know how that claim can be verified unless someone has told them it was placed. But it was basically just found next to, from my understanding. And it was placed once again, button side down and partially under Mrs. Moe and the comforter. And then they located DNA on the button of the sheath and performed STR analysis that they ran through CODIS. And the only thing that showed at that time was that the provider was a male, which is nothing groundbreaking other than that we know that the offender is a male, that at some point, if the sheath and the offender are connected, then that all just logically points that we have a male, which we now know that through the father's DNA profile that they obtained, and they made the link, and then through the genetics. And that's going to be a big issue that you're going to see here, because through the documents, when you read this, you'll see that they mention IgG a lot, and that's the investigative genetic genealogy using the DNA taken from the button of the sheath. And that is the tip that led law enforcement to investigate Mr. Kohberger. And of course, the defense says it remains unclear what the police first relied on in focusing. And in court cases, you can see as these motions are filed, what is the most troubling thing for the defense, and what is most important that they absolutely are focused on, that they must get rid of. And in this case, we see that they're focusing on the DNA and on that knife sheath, and which is a great point, because that's really, if they don't have any other DNA, this is the only link to putting Kohberger at the residence inside. You'll have all this other stuff that, okay, yes, he was out in the neighborhood, his phone connected there, he was seen in the vicinity. It's a college town, and so a lot of that can be explained. And so obviously, when you see that the defense is loading up with everything against this one item and this one DNA profile, that there's a purpose for it, and that tells you what the and what will be absolutely focused on in front of a jury. That if this even does make it to a jury, and it's admitted into the courts, this DNA profile from this sheath, it's going to be, the defense will absolutely be gunning from every angle and bring in every expert that they can to argue the point and give multiple reasons of how this could be. And even you'll see one slide I'll get to in a few minutes that they even go to the conspiracy route. And is that what they have to do? And it may fall upon that exactly what they may have to do. And then, of course, they make the claim that no matter what came first, the car or the genetic genealogy, it has provided precious little, and that there is no connection between Kohberger and the victims. Now, the rumor mill out there in the social media, there's arguments that appear on the surface to absolutely contradict this statement, that there is no connection. And I think there's examples of that. I haven't pulled them yet, but we'll look into pulling those and showing some examples at some point. And the most concerning thing I saw from all the quotes I took from this paper and from this motion was that there is no explanation for the total lack of DNA evidence from the victims in Mr. Kohberger's apartment, office, home, or vehicle. And that there was no DNA profiles transferred from the crime scene or from any of the victims into anything that belonged or Kohberger had access, that you would reason that there is no reason that the victim's DNA should be there. And that is probably one of the most shocking things to me, for the fact that I will bet a lot of money. Now, they're just making this claim. Doesn't mean that it's true. They're making the claim right now with what information that they have that has been released through discovery. And that may be the whole reason for this discovery, is that they want all of it so that there isn't being held back somewhere, and that, yes, the state at some point has some type of information that there is evidence from the victims in the apartment. I really never expected that you were ever going to see any of the victims' profile in his office. The only reason I would ever expect that you might would see the victim's DNA within his office was if that was an area that he went to change, clean up, or otherwise. I absolutely thought it would be possible within his home because you go there, you clean, you shower, change clothes, whatever, and there's all different types of potential for transfers. And the apartment, same. They're talking about the apartment, of course, in Washington, then his home in Pennsylvania. But at Pennsylvania, that would have been a high risk for him to transfer anything from Idaho to Pennsylvania that might have been contaminated with anything. But the apartment within, just a few miles of the crime scene, where he could have cleaned up and showered and stuff, I expected that there was a possibility, and there still may be. We just don't know all the information yet. But the most shocking is that I would have bet money, and I still would believe that somewhere in that vehicle um, there is some type of victim DNA within there. Have they found it yet or not? It is concerning to me that they haven't, because I would bet money that there was. And the only way I can see that you couldn't have something of DNA from the crime scene, because you were in a violent encounter with 4 individuals from that residence. And through those moments of the fight for survival, you would expect that there would be some type of transfer from their home environment to his vehicle. And what does that mean? Of course, if it stays this way, the prosecution is going to have to introduce how it is possible. What measures did Kohberger take to ensure that there wouldn't be a transfer? Because that would be something that is extraordinary. And of course, either you have to dress out your vehicle with some type of layered up with plastics, or you know, you have to remove all your clothing. And did he have time? And would he have time that if he staged his vehicle within a few hundred feet of the residence and made his escape to his vehicle, and prior to getting in his vehicle, would he have taken the time to change, or would he have just jumped in the vehicle? And then of course you got that the sleeves, the gloves, arms, pants, torso, that there would all be areas where there would be the potential of the victim's blood stains being on him. And if he used a seatbelt, you would expect there would be a possibility of a transfer. If he touched anything from the outside of the car to the inside of the car with his gloves, you would expect that they would be a transfer. And if you take this statement that there is a total lack of DNA evidence, that is quite concerning. And how will the prosecution explain that? Because they'll have to explain that, because the defense will absolutely, if this is true, will not let this go silently. They will beat this horse until it's dead, and then beat it some more. Um, and then, of course, they said that on December 17th that the lab analysts were aware of 2 additional male DNAs within the house where the deceased were located. And I expected that was going to be the case. There's going to be probably a lot more DNA profiles in that house, but they said they have 2 additional, and another unknown male on a glove found outside the residence. And that is probably the DNA on the glove outside the residence, may be the glove that there was another YouTube uh, channel that went there, found a glove outside. I don't know if this is the specific glove they're speaking about, but if it is, it was. Um, I think Chris did a show on it where the glove was in one photo wasn't there until after the crime scene was cleared, and then the gloves there. But I don't know if that's a specific glove that they're speaking about. And if it is, images exist of showing that that glove didn't show up until after the crime scene techs left. So that'll be an interesting point. I just don't know which way that will go. And that these three separate and distinct male DNA profiles were not identified through CODIS. And that with that knowledge, if they're not in CODIS and they are not linked to Kohberger, then who do they belong to? It could be any individual that has been in that residence for years, because I don't know, and we don't know exactly where they found these DNA profiles. And now, if the DNA profile comes back from some type of blood spatter, that's a totally different animal. It's not. But if it's just some type of touch DNA, then of course it can be explained. And but if it's blood, then of course Kohberger has a strong defense. I just don't know what these DNA profiles, what was the basis, and what type of evidence they come from. And of course, Mr. Kohberger has reasons to be extremely suspicious of the genealogy testing. And that's how come I put that one section in there so you see what the IgG stood for. And the statement that they put here is extremely interesting. I don't know if it serves the defense well, for the fact that they do admit that through this profile, it is either Kohberger or a relation to Kohberger. So who else of his relations possibly, because if you look at the totality of this, it says, rather than have the investigation done by someone blind to the fact, the FBI chose to do it by themselves. This is akin to the police pulling in Mr. Kohberger and 5 of his cousins off the street and then pointing at him. That's pretty confusing that they're admitting that, yes, someone that is possibly kin to Kohberger is possibly involved with it. And there may be another context of it, but that's when I first saw that, is that they're admitting that, yes, the DNA profile is close enough that it is possibly a relation to. And are they going to, who could that be? And who has visited him in Idaho? So we'll see where that goes. Then, of course, they are attacking the vehicle, which I thought the vehicle search was absolutely from the camera canvas, and locating all the cameras in the areas, able to track the vehicles. Of course, we've read through the affidavit what the prosecution says through the FBI analysts who identified the vehicle and what measures were taken, and then that the years changed on the vehicle. That when you look at this, they're going from the approach that is all, it isn't as clear as what is in the probable cause affidavit. That the analyst was heavily relying on a video of a car heading in the wrong direction and at the wrong time on Ridge Road, which I find extremely interesting. And we'll have to see, because if that is the right vehicle and it's at a certain time that doesn't allow, and it is the vehicle in question, then of course we have to look at how can that be, and what are the possibilities of that. Which you start going off into that, we're looking at other possibilities that I'm sure the prosecution will be bringing up, and of course the defense will be bringing up in the that it's exculpatory for that if this is the suspect's vehicle, then of course it's not their client. So we'll have to see. And of course, the defense, once again, they're bringing out everything they can and focusing totally upon the genealogy, DNA profile, and trying to say that this profile isn't how the state should have focused on Mr. Kohberger. And this is where the conspiracy part from the defense is kind of hinted at. It says what the state's argument asked this court and Mr. Kohberger to assume is that the DNA on the sheath was placed there by Mr. Kohberger and not someone else during an investigation that spans hundreds of members of law enforcement and apparently at least one lab the state refuses to name. You know, how much weight will that carry? Of course, this is just what the courts will see. Of course, the defense will never be able to get, or I don't imagine they could, but they may try to get this in front of the jury, but I don't see the court allowing it. But I do find this interesting that that they're saying that the state's argument is that court is that Mr. Kohberger is assuming that the DNA is on the sheath was placed there by him and him alone, and not someone else, which I don't expect that to be the case. And I hadn't even thought of that, but the defense has gone down that road, and will they be successful with it? Don't know. And then they go into that, and this is actually something that you have to give to the prosecution side on this part of it. Police were investigating many various possible suspects. Many of them provided DNA, and one of them was taken from a discarded cigarette. Evidently, that individual didn't offer his DNA freely, which is everyone's right, and so they had to take it from a cigarette. And that they also took many phones and downloaded the information on those, which is very interesting. And where you'll often see the defense attack a prosecution of their defendant by that you've never focused on anyone else. You only focused on Kohberger. Well, this statement in here says that no, that they looked at many various possible suspects, which I give kudos to the law enforcement and prosecution. And the defense absolutely gives supporting evidence that Kohberger wasn't the only one looked at. And I don't think this serves the defense in their argument that everybody absolutely jumped on the Kohberger wagon train, and that he is the one and only impossibility. This statement kind of leaves it elsewhere. All righty. With that being said, do we have any questions?
Oh, yeah. All right, we're going to start with blue light.
All right.
Thistle donated one membership, and congratulations, Miss Jill Mosier won it.
All right. Thank you.
We appreciate that.
Absolutely. We appreciate all y'all's support. It means a lot to us.
Let's see here. Make sure. All right. And now we're going to start with, let's go look. Molly. At True Crime Web, occasionally someone like Timothy McVeigh wants the DP ASAP. Can BK plead guilty and request the DP? Not saying he would, but can you do that?
No, some states don't allow self-harm. They won't take that. But I don't know what Indiana law on that is. But
Indiana.
I've been working all day on the Indiana case. I'm sorry, Idaho. And thank you for. Yeah, I work too many cases right now, but it's a must. But and I don't know what Idaho, but I don't expect that would be true for any of them. That and they do ask for it, but that doesn't mean that the court will. There's certain measures that have to occur so that someone can't do that. In my understanding.
Okay, catch up. All right, and Molly and Joe Shirky, what do you think? No DNA in car or family home?
Well, DNA linked to the victims. Absolutely, that is surprising. and more towards his apartment because that's the closest thing to the crime scene. Now, if he had kept a souvenir, and he may have kept a souvenir, we don't know, that would have been transported across country to his home. And from that souvenir, you would expect that possibly there would be DNA. So any area from his home, but I was especially surprised that there weren't some type of victim's DNA found in the car. And then my next hope was it's going to be his apartment. And then finally, possibly if he took a trophy, that there would be some type of DNA, even all the way back in Pennsylvania. In that order is how I looked at it. But that is quite surprising to me that there was no DNA of the victims found in the car. If that's true, that's just a claim currently made by the defense.
Now, is this person somebody we can, the Declaration of Vicar Burley, do you know what that is?
Mm-mm.
Okay, you want me to just exit?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I don't know who that
Okay,
is.
we'll look that up.
Yeah.
All right. And from Juicy, what exactly is a protective order, and can either side, defense or prosecution, you submit them?
My understanding of this is that they're trying to keep certain names of individuals and labs and used. Um, let's see here, and uh, it's right. Okay, here. Um, that the state is refusing to name at least one of the labs that was used to process some of the evidence. Don't know which that is. Should be, and I expect that the court will tell them labs it is, and I can't see why they wouldn't have uh, offered that. Um, but are there other investigators or other names they've kept out that the that uh, the state may have, like some of these unknowns, and that if the state's not going to be bringing them, and the state knows who these individuals are on these DNA profiles, and the defense doesn't, are those the names that the defense is trying to get? I would expect so. That there's names out there that the state has that they are not sharing, and the defense wants those names.
And M. Cunningham, didn't they get, or can they get, Kohberger's DNA through a swab?
They got it, and from my understanding, it was in that 5.23 or 32 octillion that it was the DNA. Uh, uh, to the exclusion of all others, it was Kohberger's DNA from the button to him. In the last stuff that DNA information that was released last week, which is huge. I was happy with just the numbers when they said that whoever the contributor to the DNA profile was the son of Kohberger's father. That was good enough for me. But then when they came out and it's an absolute match, and that shows you well how much this one link to the crime scene is to the defense, and they are going to go after it with every thing that they can to get it out of the court because it is the one thing that they can't overcome.
All right. And 63 clocks. Is it true that there is no other DNA or identifying items found? Is this what the defense has stated? Also, are they able to make 3 claims under the gag order?
Well, the this motion has been released, and through the motions, a lot of stuff can be released, and that's what they use this for. Um, and um, uh, and it's something that should be out there to the public. And if the state has this information, it doesn't mean that it's true. This is how you know when you read the probable cause affidavit and you see how the prosecutors and the officers that obtained those probable cause affidavits, they leaned it in their way. this is this objection motion was submitted by the defense, and they're going to lean it in their way. It's just a boxing match, and it goes one side to the other. But it is concerning that if this information isn't being shared, why isn't it? And if it is true, um, then I can see, like I said, I was surprised that there wasn't any DNA in that car. And they made the claims in this order.
Okay, just trying to catch up here. All right, and from Juicy B. Well, first, I'm going to have that, and we're going to do a blue light for Barry, 8-month member.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Right, now back to Juicy B. Is it obvious that Kohberger used his education to carefully plan and to commit and hide his crimes?
It appears so, for the fact that Mrs. Steve and I discussed this over supper tonight of what measures he would have had to take. And I'll be looking into that. I'll probably be trying to reconstruct some of that and time it out and see what measures I have to do, because I have the synthetic blood to recreate certain blood spatter and put on my Tyvek suit and try to dress out and see what the time limits would be on that. It's probably what I'm going to do. Mrs. Steve and I discussed that would be something interesting to look at and see if it's possible.
All right. And Olivia, too. That absolutely blows my mind. How could there be no DNA in his car?
Well, that's what I'm going to try to test out and see, for the fact that
we're still working on that one.
If he knew that there was a survivor in the residence, now, if he had tunnel vision and he missed the witness standing there who, as he walked by and didn't see her, is one thing. He could go out to his vehicle and in a certain manner and take his time and maybe strip outer layers off in a certain area, bag them, and then, of course, have his vehicle protected. But like I said, the prosecution is going to have to explain, if this is true, how is that possible? And I'm going to try to do it myself. I'll do something similar I've done to my other crime scenes and see what the time limits would be. Because if he knew that he had been witnessed inside the residence and he was on a time clock trying to escape, you wouldn't think he'd have time to change and prepare himself to get back in his car and travel away from the scene without some type of transfer.
Okay, hold on.
That is truly amazing. There was no DNA, if it's true.
All right. Already did that one. And from Anne, some of this is just defense rhetoric. Quote, no connection between BK and the victims, end quote. What does that claim even mean? No connection before the crime, at the crime, just a motion filler?
And that's the thing, is that if you say there's no connection, then of course we have to throw out every time that his vehicle was in the area, or the time that his device linked up with the residence, and information like that. And so we just have to see also if there was any of the social media connections. And, I think there were some that if they're not photoshopped and they actually exist, that there is some evidence that there is a connection of people following each other, from Kohberger being linked to at least one of them. And so I don't think that's an accurate statement. And probably what you said, just motion filler.
Okay.
Because if they can't get rid of the blood at the crime scene, then we do have a big connection between Kohberger and the victims. And that's how come they have to get this where there's no connection.
Okay, so that's Ann. All right, hold on 1 second for me. Got some blue, maybe. Got some blue light for Haley.
Thank you, Haley. $5 super sticker. Appreciate your support. We absolutely couldn't do what we do on our cold cases without that support. Awesome.
All right, and Juicy B. I forget, did Kohberger know any of the victims? Were they ever students of his or his professors?
Not that I know of that there's been any link as far as that, that they were any of his students. Have none of that. Now, of course, some of the social media links are out there, but none that I know of about being students or professors.
Okay. And Juicy B again. What about footprints with all that snow? Were there any found?
I think there was some. You see CSI outside processing, and I don't think there was a solid snow cover. That came later, but at the time of the crime, I think it was very sparse. But the footprint in the house matching the description of what the surviving witness said occurred, and they found that shoe print. Is the only footprint that I know of that they have currently mentioned.
Okay. And I've already done that one. And Olivia, how could there be no footprints with all the blood?
Well, we have one we know of, and which I, from my synthetic test that Mrs. Steve and I did, we were able to create transfers over 100 feet, which I wanted to do, and I found that extremely amazing. And they may have more footprints than what they just provided in the probable cause affidavit, and I'd be surprised if they didn't. They just don't have to mention everything, but they did mention that one, and I expect they have more. Um, but that's just speculating on my part, and seeing crime scenes of where such incidents like this occurred, not with 4 victims of a knife and where there's that much blood spatter, but it is absolutely amazing that there wasn't more documented that they did release.
Okay. Whoa. All right, we've got some blue light coming in.
Good.
Maybe. Oh, here it is. Oh, let me get rid of her. Blue light for Debbie W.
Please keep in mind that DK is considered innocent until convicted by a jury. I know it's difficult, but please, everyone, keep your mind open to the possibility that he may be innocent. And that's true. Absolutely. And we've got to see all the prosecution unload on him with all the probable cause stuff and the times that he was in the area and is linking up with the residents and the sheath and the DNA, because that while it's strong doesn't mean that a jury couldn't see it otherwise. And without that sheath and that DNA, regardless of what we or individuals out here conclusions that we come to, it's what that impaneled jury finds and what is presented to them, because they won't have opinions. They won't have the ability of the internet and research. It's what would be presented in court. And if the defense can keep that DNA profile out, then of course that's what they're fighting for. And then without that DNA profile, who among us could really um, have that much confidence of the case against Kohberger?
Okay, get that one. And Sean, Mr. Steve, if LE expedites the DNA, how long would it take for them to get results?
I'm telling you, it used to be, it was a long, long, long time, but we had there was a abduction in Tennessee, whereas within just a few hours they had a DNA profile. And so, when it's expedited now, and it depends on, I'm sure, what type of DNA and what they're getting the DNA off of, that some of it is extremely quick. Uh, it appears that within 24 hours, because that's what happened in Tennessee on a case. Either it was this spring or last fall.
Yeah, I don't remember. All right, and from Janet. Steve, at True Crime Web, do you think that they would have checked pipes, drains, etc., in case he showered in the residence before leaving?
I I would be surprised if they didn't. I would be surprised if they didn't take uh, the traps from the sink, both from the bathroom and the kitchen, the traps from if he had washer, um, and also whatever they could have been able to get out of the shower trap if it's accessible. But I would expect they did that. Doesn't mean they did. I would have.
All right. And 846 Philadelphia. Okay. And let's see here. From Olivia 2, did BK even have time to shower at the residence?
Well, we have this. His phone went off and when his phone came back on and what that timeline is and that window of opportunity. And we'll go back and pull that timeline again in a future show. And but yes, even after all his travels of when his phone was pinging all the way through um, after the he came back online and cell towers started pinging his phone again and his travels through certain areas and through his route that was documented. Uh, of course, he has all the time in the world because he wasn't, he went back to his residence and he wasn't immediately picked up or identified for extended period of time. So yes, he had as much time in the world that he needed to shower at his residence as anyone would have given the time frame that he had.
All right. And M. Cunningham, how could someone else, after the fact, put Kohberger's DNA on it?
Yes, I agree, and that is going to be a strong point for the prosecution. And of all the things uh, for that claim to be made is kind of on the fringe because that is a strong statement to make.
Okay.
Not saying it's never occurred, but that is a strong statement to make.
Okay. And from Dave, Steve, do you think BK had a helper?
The only thing that ever caused me to think that one more than one could be involved was when law enforcement during one of their briefings um, talking about occupant or occupants in a vehicle, and uh, at that time it was early on, and it still um, is something that I don't have a final answer for. But law enforcement would be able to almost reach that conclusion um, for the fact that if there is another uh, person involved, there would be some type of ability through text messaging, phone calls, um, any type of digital footprints of how he would have communicated with another individual, even with the pinging of phones constantly showing up at the same place. So there's a lot of ways that law enforcement could establish that he was hanging out with someone, or he had a friend, or he had an accomplice. But um, if we don't see that, then of course it's not, for the fact that the crime that was committed is not something that BK could just go down, pick up a stranger on the corner and say, hey, here's my car, uh, drive it around the block, and pick me back up in a few minutes. And that's not something that would anyone would ever be able to convince a jury of. So it's not something that's plausible.
Okay. And from Anna, there was a rumor that the my school offender wore a paper suit, which he discarded before getting in the car. Just a rumor, as far as I know, but didn't they find paper booties in his apartment?
Um, I can't remember about the paper booties. I have a list of everything that was taken out of there, but I don't remember the paper booties. But it may be possible. But I'm going to be testing the Tyvek suit, paper suit, whatever you want to call it, the painter suit. I'm going to test that and see what type of cross contamination or bleed through that could occur from such an attempt of trying to protect yourself from any type of contamination or cross blood spatter that you would be exposed to during such a fight for survival that would have occurred with 4 victims. Because anytime a victim suffers severe injuries with an edged weapon, there's a lot of blood transfer. And there's no way in the world that there wouldn't have been some type of blood transfer onto him in some manner. And he would have to have something that I would go along with your idea that there would be exterior um, clothing that he would have to discard.
Okay. And from Monique, question: if there was any DNA of the victims on BK's belongings, would it have already been documented by now? Explain gag order again, please.
The gag order is basically, from my understanding, is that they've looked at it and they're keeping any of the attorneys um, that are involved in this case, representing either the victims, families, and therefore that they're keeping the attorneys from talking. Everyone else can talk, but it's the attorneys themselves, from my understanding and the clarification that will be coming out, because there's been asked for clarification on certain issues. And currently, like I said, from my understanding, is the gag order is totally focused on the attorneys involved in this case. Um, and if there is DNA of the victims, and that's what we have from this one statement, that in the absence of, let's see, where is it? Let me get up here. There is no explanation for the total lack of DNA evidence from the victims in Mr. Kohberger's apartment, office, home, or vehicle. Um, and and this is what they absolutely are wanting to be clarified, that if this is true, and they're asking the court to make the state tell them, y'all don't have something in hiding waiting to throw on us, from which I don't believe the court would even allow, because it's not right to do so. But they're going to clarify and make sure that this explanation, that there is none, is the only um, explanation that the jury will ever hear, that there is no DNA from the victims in any possession or own any possession of Kohbergers.
Mm-hmm.
Which is huge. That's hard to overcome.
Okay. I'm 63 Clocks at True Crime Web. I believe that state will provide all info required by law to the defense. If by some reason they do not, what is the penalty for not doing so? Thank you.
I'm sure the judge would have certain sanctions and stuff for that, and including everything from a mistrial if it's some part during the trial, and it can be overturned on appeals. And so, uh, no one wants to have a case overturned and have such a mark against their career. And I don't see the prosecution or the state doing that. And if they do, then of course they face everything from what the judge can sanction them with to what the appeal court will say, and overturn it, and then we'll be back on square one.
And Juicy B, if the defense wants any information that the state is using against Kohberger, isn't it the law under disclosure that each party needs to allow the other party to see all of its findings?
Well, and absolutely, but the state evidently filed a motion for a protective order of certain individuals' names and a lab, evidently, and the and and are keeping that away from the from the defense. And the defense says, no, this isn't right. We want this, and so the court will look at it, review it, and come back with a decision. Um, because we have a motion by the state saying we've released everything, but this isn't what we're willing to release, and we want it protected. And of course, the defense says no, we have a right to it, and we want to see it. So we'll see what the court says. The judge will have to make that decision.
All righty. Let's see here. You got several more. You still good?
I'm good. Appreciate everybody being here tonight, and we appreciate everyone's support.
All right. And from Miss Ann Broom, Mr. Steve, do we actually know where he parked his car during the commission of the crime? I don't think so.
You know, they paid a lot of attention to the upper parking lot back behind the residence. You know, there's a lot of news crews that had video footage of that, and then we have the tire marks in front of the residence on the roadway that law enforcement was paying a lot of attention to. How could that occur, and what would have caused um, those markings from the tires? Um, and why was law enforcement focused on them? There's a reason that that information was brought to law enforcement and why they were looking in those areas specifically. But I don't know that they've ever identified exactly um, where the footprints led to. Now, they may have brought canines in and tracked an individual. I don't know, but that's a possibility that through canine that they tracked to a certain area. And then you always have the possibility, like Mrs. Steve and I, when we did the shoe transfer of the synthetic blood as she walked on that walkway, um, that they may have been able to see a direction he was heading, and possibly even with some type of enhancement like luminol, uh, tracked him across a surface to a certain location. I just don't know.
And Anna, will an ozone machine destroy DNA? My friend used one of those after a tenant had passed away and not been found for a couple of weeks. Ozone machine eliminated all smell.
hmm You know, I don't know about those. I know that there are some chemicals out there that absolutely will. Um, and what chemicals did he use? Because FBI says that, and Pennsylvania law enforcement says that he was using and cleaning vehicle even at the residence in Pennsylvania. Uh, and how many times prior to leaving did he clean his vehicle and clean other things? But I'll have to look at that ozone. I have no idea.
Now, the ozone machines are used in claim mitigation,
hmm
but it it tends to go more towards the odor,
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
like they'll remove something
Mhm.
and then use the ozone thing to get the
Mhm.
stench.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what all is involved with the ozone machine. I'll have to
Yeah.
research that. Is it temperature wise also, or is it just?
Well, it's that and it's airflow and the ozone machines when I first started or when they first started using them were huge. Now they're actually smaller.
Okay.
You could probably talk to Profire.
Okay. Yeah. I have no idea about the ozone machine.
I'll get you somebody to talk to about
Okay. Good question. We'll follow up on that. Thank you.
that. All right. And let's see here.
Oh.
And if Ellie had apprehended him the night of the crime or within hours thereafter, lack of DNA in car might be damning to the state case. But he had what, 6 weeks before they arrested him?
Yes, but even with that, I would expect because blood is hard to clean. It really is, and with even certain chemicals. Um, and but I'm going to test it, and I'm going to use that synthetic. And Mrs. Steve, um,
I
once
get to
it,
do some more walking.
and she gets to do some more cleaning, and I'll see what chemicals I can apply and see how I can mask, and because that will be interesting.
Just what I need. Something else to wash
Hmm.
of yours.
Yeah, won't be the first time.
All right. And from Cynthia, does anyone know who the informants could be?
And that is going to be another issue, and of course, no, I do not have any idea. I would expect it's some of it may be. It depends on what part of the uh, information. Some of that could be family because there's been some mention about certain family members being suspicious, and then of course you also have where it could be people um, that have knowledge of Kohberger, and I can see where certain people should be protected because what the social media and what the public and people out here in the public, there's certain things that shouldn't be known, and but now they should be known to the defense, and so that they'll have full opportunity to do whatever's necessary. But to the general public, we don't have a need to know all the informants' names.
Blue light for
Mike
Mike
D.
D.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Mike. That's awesome. I'll be using that in what, 2 weeks? 2 weeks.
Y'all say a prayer. I've got a long time by my fail.
July's got a full month.
Sad. All right. Truffles says dog hair in car.
Um, they didn't say fiber now. That is interesting. This is totally focused only pretty much the DNA part of it. I hadn't even, as I was reading this, I hadn't even considered other um, uh, types of fiber and hair and other evidence that might link. It's pretty much everything they're attacking is on the DNA part of it from both the victims and uh, but they didn't mention dog hair. That's a good point. Good catch.
And Nick's 76. Oh, I like that. Nick's 76. Sorry, I might have missed this, but do they have to reveal all the DNA evidence they have at this stage? Could they be holding some back for the trial?
And that's what it appears that the defense is absolutely going to try to make sure that they're not. And this objection will clarify that um, and correctly. I believe so. You know, you can't hold back stuff. Discovery is discovery, and there's state laws that says certain things have to be released, and I believe it should be.
Okay.
For it to be a fair trial, that's the only way it can go is everything has to be released.
All right, and Juicy B, do you know how much, if any, are Brian's family members helping the police?
No, there's rumors of, I think about one of the sisters had done some research and stuff. And, uh, you know, how much help we don't know. And is that what part of this protective order is for? Could be. But I would expect Brian would already know who's talking and who's not. And I would expect so that he absolutely knows because that is his family. He knows who contacts him, he knows who he talks to, and he knows what conversations he's had.
And Truffles, Brian's apartment was searched and they found nothing.
It appears that they, if you go by this, that there was nothing in his apartment, office, home, or vehicle as far as DNA. And which that is interesting, extremely interesting.
Impressive. And ooh, Jay Lee reacts. They have his DNA on the knife sheath, though, right?
Yes, from my understanding, whatever that octillion is, that huge number of that associates his DNA profile to that that was found on the sheath. That with that one key point is what is the link to him and these homicides currently. That's the biggest piece of evidence that I see right now.
Okay, and from Jeff, Steve, we haven't heard anything about the doctor's appointment BK had, correct? Hoping investigators check that out and that comes out.
It is interesting of why he went, and there's several different reasons. I've heard everything from that. It's part of his master's plan scheme to be examined by a doctor shortly after a crime, so that the doctor can say that he had no injuries. I've heard that, and then I've heard that he had some type. That rumors are out there that he was injured, and he went to see a doctor, and so law enforcement would absolutely look into that, and they wouldn't miss something like that.
Juicy B, if I could get away, I would be going with him, but I have obligations at home. But thank you for the offer to stay in MA. All right, let's see here. Let me go get me another one. Just ask that. And Deb, nothing in car, nothing in apartment. Was this with this bloody scene? Is that what they're saying?
Yes.
All right, that's quick.
And I find that, like I said, I'm going to do some testing in the this coming up week, and I'm going to see if I can't see what how easily it is to dress out, and how quick you can.
All right, so I got one for you.
All right.
All right, this here's from Janet. Steve, is it possible to wear two lots of protective coverings and discard top layer before entering the car?
I'll let you know next week.
Add that to the list.
Yes, I'll let you know next week.
All right, and from Ann, Mr. Stever. Well, there is probably the victim's blood on that knife sheath together with Perp's DNA on same sheath. So that's pretty persuasive, don't you think? Just saying.
Yes, and that's the whole thing that's brought us to this point, that without that DNA profile, what would they have? And now they may have, and like I said, we have to clarify that they're only talking about, they didn't say, and that's something that we can look at that's important. They said that there's no evidence from the victims in Kohberger's apartment, office, home, or vehicle. They don't say that there's no evidence of Kohberger in the victim's home. So they haven't attacked that. And so I'm hoping that there is not only this knife sheath, but there's because that's just as um, uh, showing his involvement in the case, along with the knife sheath, if they have additional DNA profiles of Kohberger in the residence more than just the sheath. And I'm hoping that's the case. And I expect it is the case. If he's the one that did this, I expect his DNA will be found in other places.
Okay, so keep going.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and this is priceless.
Okay.
Unearthed secrets. Marty, some of us relate. Can you repeat everything you said in the last 56 minutes? Thanks.
No, you're going to have to go back and replay it.
Priceless. All right, and Juicy B, why would the prosecution be so hung up on keeping secrets from the defense? Do they have such little convictional evidence in such an incredible case?
Well, we have to look at that. This is what the defense does. They go out there and through this motion, they're able to claim certain things. And of course, they're going to lean it more towards the defense of Kohberger, just like the prosecution. When the prosecution released and the courts released the probable cause affidavits and all of this, everything was leaning more towards their favor, and they're able to put their spin on it. This time, the defense is putting their spin on it, and they're making as much, giving as much weight to their claims that, yes, this is what the prosecution is doing to us. It's unfair, and we need this, and y'all should feel sorry for us. And it's nothing that you won't see in this case and 1,000 other cases that we'll see in the future. Each side does these big claims of it's um, piteous.
All right. And from I gotta get rid of that one. And from Jeff, the skid marks they were investigating, nothing said on those either as a match to his vehicle.
We don't know if that now will that come out in the future in another different type of motion, if possible, but that will come out in court regardless, because there's more than just the match of tread design. It can be everything from what and chemicals of different materials used in the making of that tire, and what's on Kohberger's vehicle, because they may be able to make a comparison of those each of those compounds found in the tire from the skid marks that were in front of the residence to his vehicle, which would be huge.
Okay. And from Deb, Mr. Steve, have you ever thought BK was being railroaded?
No, I haven't. I really haven't. But this is the first time that, like I said, we have to be fair about it right now. And but it is a huge point that I would expect there would be some type of contamination in the vehicle. And if the prosecution can't explain why there's not, it's going to get a little difficult for them unless they have more Kohberger's DNA in the residence. If it's just a knife sheath and they can't, and the defense is able to keep that out of the court, it's going to be a tough road for the prosecution.
And from Monique, what if BK actually had two Hyundai? The reason for wrong vehicle year.
I had thought of that, but and is it possible? And where would that vehicle be? And who could, if he had purchased another one, someone would surely have recognized him by now. But that doesn't mean it's not possible. But I mean, you can go with every speculation and create as much a web as you can, but I don't think so. Is it possible? Yes, but probable? No. But then I may be surprised, and you may be 100% correct.
Okay. And Jeff, Steve, maybe he sprayed a chemical inside the vehicle prior that prevented blood DNA from adhering within and cleaned it off afterward. Just an idea.
I don't
Anything like that?
I don't know of any chemical that would do that. Now, of course, you can have chemicals that will um, uh, destroy DNA. Is that possible? Absolutely. But you would still think that there would be some reaction to the blood, because you can have a reaction to blood and not have a DNA profile.
Mm. And unearthed secrets. Marty, dirt and such on his car from his long drive afterwards would probably be different from where he normally drives.
Well, they were able to track his movements for a long time on his pings, and would they have, um, you know, there's a lot of different ways that CSI can go out there and see where vehicles are driven during certain times of the year. From, um, you know, the radiator of a vehicle absolutely captures everywhere you drove for the last year, and you can go and through insects and determine where vehicles have been. And you're right. The dirt analysis would show, and grass and weeds, of what environments he drove into. And unless you have a specific um, type of weed or grass that could be identified, it's, it's something that works in CSI every week, but it doesn't mean that it will work on this case. If you watch a CSI show, that's what they're able to do in an hour.
They are good, man. They are good. Okay. And heck, okay. And M. Cunningham, could they have gotten his DNA off of victims?
I'm hoping that is exactly the case, because, like I said, this is one-sided. That they're just saying that none of the victims' DNA was in the apartment, office, home, or vehicle. It doesn't say that Kohberger's DNA wasn't in the crime scene residence, and I'm hoping that is the case.
Okay.
Because they got DNA of his from beside one of the victims on that knife sheath.
Okay. And from Anna, didn't witness describe suspect as wearing black? He could have had thin windbreaker type jacket and pants, easy to pull off and discard.
Yes, absolutely, and that's something that we're going to look at just with regular clothing too, so that when I run these tests and then I luminol, I'll be able to have a better answer for you on this scenario in a few days or a week or two. It just depends. Um, I don't know if I may be out of luminol, so I may have to make another order of luminol.
Really?
That could be.
And Janet, do you think BK had luminol to check to make sure he didn't leave DNA in his car?
Well, it's possible. Um, Anything is possible. But if to do that, um, that would show up that you have to purchase that, and there are certain chemicals and from certain distributors. Now, if he just used the certain, I think it's like Blue Star, um, you can get it for tracking uh, wildlife or deer. For hunters, use it. It'll work very similar to luminol, and it is actually a variation of luminol, but some of it alters DNA, and so law enforcement can't use it. But could he have checked with that? Absolutely. And did he? That's a good question. And if he ever purchased that, because you can get that pretty easy online.
And Juicy B, do you think there was a significant amount of evidence lost because the crime was not reported for so many hours?
No, I don't. If law enforcement, because that happens all the time, there's crime scenes, and we're talking about a protected crime scene that's inside of a residence, and you have these rooms that people, when you, even when witnesses walk in and they see that first victim that's there, and they see the violence of what possibly is in that room. A lot of witnesses, that's as far as they go. Just as soon as they see the horror, they instantly back out, and they leave the residence and call law enforcement. Every now and then you'll have where there would be a witness that might go in and touch a victim. Generally, it's someone that's very close to the victim and is trying to render aid. But typically, the more horrible the crime scene is, the less evidence that will be damaged or contaminated.
And you are done.
All righty, guys. Well, I appreciate everybody being here tonight.
Yep.
And whoop, okay.
Juicy B's at it again. Have there been any other killings that could connect this crime to others?
Not that we know of. And of course, law enforcement's been looking at that, and social media and some of the web sleuths have tried to link some other crimes to him. Is it possible? Yes, absolutely. And we'll just have to see where that goes in the future. But I know of no other victims currently.
One more.
Mm-hmm.
And from Deb, Mr. Steve, if they did have DNA in victim house, wouldn't they say that as well?
No, not necessarily. I mean, the defense isn't going to bring it up. The prosecution would, of course, make that available for discovery. And if there's a gag order, of course, the prosecution is not going to bring it up, and the DNA, and the defense can't bring it up either because they're in a gag order. So it might be something that exists, but the defense in this one statement here is going from the other side, that there's none of the victims in Kohbergers. They don't say there's none of Kohbergers in the victims. Two sides of a coin.
All right. And we got some blue light here.
All right.
We got Juicy B became a YouTube member.
Thank you. Appreciate your support.
So we appreciate that.
Yep.
Glad to have you on board.
Absolutely.
And this is priceless. Thanks, Mr. and Mrs. Steve Another great session. She did apologize for Steve but actually it was kind of funny.
Yeah.
So it worked out good. All right. And let's see here. Let me make sure. I hope I didn't miss any. If I did, I apologize. All right. You're good.
All right. Well, guys, we appreciate y'all's support. It means a lot to us. We got a lot going on in the coming days and weeks. And, but y'all stay safe out there, and we'll see y'all next time. And thank y'all.
Love you.